Hello and good evening, I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Hafiz Mazuki.
Welcome to Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider the news of the day. Now let's begin with comments made this weekend by former Bersih chairperson Dato' Ambiga Srinivasan. So she was at a forum on the Institutional Reform Committee report, and Ambiga warned that if the Pakatan Harapan government does not implement certain key reforms by June, that the people will, quote-unquote, go to the streets again. Now, if I may quote her directly, some of these reforms are already drafted, according to Ambiga. If these things cannot be pushed through by June, it is a total failure of Pakatan Harapan's commitment to reform, unquote. Now, Hafiz, what do you make of her comments there? Quite strong comments coming from Ambiga.
Well, Melisa, it sounds like she's very frustrated. And of course, we can understand where her frustrations are coming from, because as you can see, she is part of the reform committee, and it is very frustrating when you're part of a committee and you want to impose on all these reforms, but unfortunately it is not going at the pace that you want. However, it is we have to remember that it is impossible to call for reforms and expect them to be done the very next day or the very next month, and it's very hard to actually put a timeline, a set timeline on a reform, because as you can see from the IPCMC, the plans are actually to have them pass back in December, but
right.
However, due to certain things, it is moved up to the next sitting.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with you in that respect, where I think Ambiga's comments really reflect a tone of frustration. But I for one, and I'm just speculating here, I don't think she is in any way impatient by the lack of progress in reform, because I think she's given more than enough time. Many of us are hoping for more progress on the reforms, and the fact that many of the reforms, you mentioned IPCMC, Hafiz, and absolutely true, the fact that it's back and forth, and we haven't actually seen any progress on that respect, feels to many that Pakatan Harapan is maybe not as committed to the reforms as we once thought they were.
Her comment sounds like, and probably she's twisting the hand of the government and
yeah,
saying that,
like a bit of an ultimatum, right?
Yeah, you get it done, or otherwise, we are going to go to the streets and make sure that you pay for it.
Yeah, saying that people could go to the streets again, and I really think that she's saying people are not afraid of going to the streets, even though they had initially supported Pakatan Harapan. There's another comment, Hafiz, that she made that I thought is particularly interesting. Now, she said that she no longer recognizes some of those in Pakatan Harapan since they became part of government, saying that they are now so afraid of the people who put them there, and she finds this all a bit alarming, calling for where is the courage. So it takes courage to do things differently from the way it's been done in the past.
I guess, Melisa, this is all part of being in the government syndrome, as I would call it, because technically when you are in power, you'll do everything you can to stay in power, and you can see that the government, those who are in government, those who are in power, would tend to pander to those who they feel they need support to remain in power. And other than that, I think the courage she's talking about is just not talking about pandering to the right wing and everything, but also the civil servants, because sometimes you don't want to tread on their toes.
Right, you don't want to cause too much of a ruckus having just come into office. And I think, well, now it's been some time, right? 1.5 years that Pakatan Harapan has been in. I'm really wondering whether, Ambiga's comments show that perhaps the nature of realpolitik in Malaysia just means that no matter who is in office, who is in Putrajaya, the nature of politik is that we have to conform or pander, as you use, to certain right-wing conservative groups. And whether courage is what is needed, and whether we know what we want from our government, and whether the Pakatan Harapan has the courage to do that.
I think it is down to making sure that the people know what they vote into, and making sure that people understand that reform takes time, and you cannot expect that everything is just done. It's like an instant Maggie.
Okay, so here's what I want to ask. So when we think about what is at stake for the Pakatan Harapan government, they know that they have to please certain groups to be able to keep into power. And I'm wondering, which is more important? Should they prioritize the reform that they once promised to win GE14, or should they prioritize a longevity of governance? Because we know reform doesn't happen overnight, reform doesn't happen in one term. Should they be thinking about how to maximize staying in power so that they can implement these reforms, or should they prioritize the reforms right now, today?
I think they have to prioritize reform because it is about doing what you campaign to do. And if you talk about just being in the government long enough, then you're just no different from the previous government.
Exactly. All right, well, let's move on to other news. We have a survey done by the think tank Centre for a Better Tomorrow, or better known as CENBET. Now, this survey found that almost 60% of Malaysians polled say that they want local council elections revived. But what is also very interesting is at the same time, this survey found that most Malaysians don't know who their local council representatives are, or even the councillors' job scope. So you want local councils, but you don't actually know what local councils do.
Actually, I think that's probably why you want local council elections. I, for one, want local council elections because I want to know who I'm voting for.
Okay, do you know what local councils do?
Well, technically, I know some of it. There's something to do with waste management.
I don't know who my local councillor is. And I have to say, I'm not surprised at the result of this survey, Hafiz, because, listen, it's been more than 50 years that we've gone without local council elections here in Malaysia. It's, very few people will remember the last time we had local government elections. I think it was 1963, the last time it was held. But I don't necessarily think that just because if we bring back local council elections, we will automatically then know what it is. Because many of us out there don't even know what our elected representatives do, what MPs do, what ADUNs do,
yes,
right?
I think it's part of the whole process. When you want to get people to understand more about how local governments work, how state governments work, they have to be participating in the process.
Yep.
And this would be one avenue of doing such a thing. And the Penang state government tried to bring local council elections. They tried to bring forth an amendment in 2012, but unfortunately the battle with federal court ruled it as unconstitutional. So we have to see what is needed to ensure that this is can be rolled out to the people.
Right. I think also it's quite interesting. It reminds me of a conversation we once had with the MP of Bukit Pantai, Lembah Pantai, Fahmi Fazil. And this was when we were talking about MPs going missing in Parliament. And one of the things he brought out was the fact that many people don't understand the role of an MP. And they go to MPs to solve issues about potholes, about longkangs, about public infrastructure. So MPs are then seen to play the role of local councillors, entertaining all these complaints, when in fact MPs should be in Parliament debating and considering all the laws and the policies that will impact our bigger lives. Now, I'm just wondering whether having local council elections will make us a little bit more cognizant of the different roles and the job scopes of each.
I certainly hope so, because this is what we've been waiting for so many years, and I think this would take a step further in ensuring the service delivery to the people is somewhat improved.
Yeah, well, if you know the job scope of your colleague, you should know the job scope of your local councillor. All right, after this, we're going to take a closer look at the implications of the Kimanis by-election results. Stay tuned to consider this. Welcome back to Consider This. Melisa and Hafiz here with you tonight. Now, what was supposed to be a relatively straightforward win for Parti Warisan Sabah, which is according to a survey done by Ilham Centre, had turned into a comfortable victory for Barisan Nasional instead in Kimanis. Now, what went wrong for Pakatan Harapan and Warisan? to discuss this further, we have joining us on the line Associate Professor Hamidin Hamid, Senior Fellow at Ilham Centre. Hamidin, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Now, I want to point out that it's really worth noting that Ilham Centre correctly predicted a comfortable win for Barisan Nasional in the previous Tanjung Piai by-elections. This was last year in November, but this time, you guys were really off the mark in projecting a victory for Warisan. So, Hamidin, what happened? What did you miss in this by-election?
Thank you, Melisa, for having me tonight. I think when it comes to Kimanis, we noticed there is a lot of changes in the last couple of days of campaigning, but we produced our report for the media 3 days before the voting days. But at the same time, we do notice there is a lot of new momentum in regard to the campaigning by the Barisan Nasional particularly that we believe will influence the result. However, in regard to our report, we noticed in the beginning our variables looking at certain issues that we think that will give advantage to the Warisan as a ruling party. We noticed that the campaign was well accepted. Some of the issues were taken care, especially the local issues by the Warisan in Kimanis. Even though in the first first 10 days of the campaign, we noticed the PSS issues becoming a kind of snowball impact on the campaign. So I think our trajectory. We notice there is a variable that is important, and we notice that, but I think we underestimate the tractions when it comes to the PSS, and also the tractions when it comes to the role of big man, the role of warlord in Sabah politics.
So Hamidin, I mean, looking at this by-election victory by Barisan, so what did Barisan Nasional got right, and what did Warisan got wrong in this by-election campaign?
I think looking at what's going right to Barisan in regard to campaign strategy in Kimanis is very much the issues that they played. They really managed to manipulate the issues of PSS in regard to security, in regard to threat of socio-economic to the citizen of Sabah. I think they really managed to do that. So, meaning they not only talking about politics, but they're talking about. They managed to touch the sentiment of the people in regard to the problems vis-a-vis with immigrant and undocumented immigrant. I think for the Warisan, they underestimate the importance of PSS, the importance of psychologically the psychic of the voters in regard to that issues. I think that's why in the beginning they're looking at more strategically. They're looking at kind of continuity as a legacy issues. PSS is a legacy from the Barisan Nasional and what they have to continue to do that. But I think that's the first mistake of Warisan in regard to Kimanis, in regard to PSS, is very much underestimate the importance of the issues to the people.
So, Hamidin, what do you reckon will happen to PSS now? I mean, what do you expect to happen to this initiative?
I think personally, and then when we do our survey, we did couple of questions actually, 3 questions specifically in regard to PSS. And we noticed most of the correspondents have no idea or not have a fully understand what is PSS is all about. And in most of them, the decisions or the perception is on regard to PSS is very much not based on facts of the matters. I think PSS is a good policy where they want to centralize the issues of undocumented migrant, and I think they should continue with that because now there is 3 agencies that are producing cards for the migrants in Sabah. I think that we should continue with that, but the challenge for the state is really to make people understand. And they highlight the issue. I think the issues is the issues of trust. I think that's we notice in Kimanis, where the Barisan, the state government, and also the federal government have to build the trust of the people that the matters is really about to safeguard the citizenship of the people and to solve the issues of undocumented migrant. I think that is the biggest challenge that's going to be faced by Warisan government in Sabah to build the trust with the people in regard to the PSS.
So Hamidin, with regards to this loss, so what does this result meant for warisan at the state level, and also what does it mean for the Pakatan Harapan government as a whole at the federal level?
I think when we see how we approach the matters for Isham in the beginning, we notice that the importance of Kimanis is very much to give a clear picture for Warisan that they are in control of the political fraction in Sabah, particularly in control of the big men in Sabah politics. I think for followers of Sabah politics, we notice that Sabah politics very much characterized by big man role or warlord in Sabah. So we thought that Kimanis is very much a success for Shafi'i Afdal, the chief minister, having control of that group. But it seems from the data that we have, things happen in contrast for that. Seem that the personality, the big men are still there. So looking forward, I think the biggest challenge, Sabah politics will continue to be volatile. I think to really get in control of the fractions, the warlord in this area is going to be a big challenge politically. Right. But in regard to that, when we do our survey, we also notice that some of the people are quite happy or satisfied with the current administration of Warisan government in Sabah, administratively speaking. So that is kind of a good plus point for PH government in Sabah.
Okay. Well, you know, there were some pundits, some political observers who said that the Sarawak government will be looking at the Kimanis by-elections in Sabah as a barometer or a gauge of the sentiment there, and that could impact when the Sarawak government will choose to call for elections within the territory. Now, I'm just wondering, how do you see this result impacting the Sarawak elections?
Oh yeah, definitely, Melisa. When we see in Kimanis, for example, even though some pundits want to play the role of national issues and other, but we see it's almost absent in Kimanis. For example, the issues have been mostly debated in Semenanjung. For example, the issues of Muafakat Nasional is almost absent even in the campaign in Kimanis. Nobody even mentioned about Muafakat Nasional in Sabah. So, in my point of view, one good learning lesson for Sarawak government in regard to Kimanis is very much how for them to tackle local issues. I think that what matters most, especially in regard to the state election, because the focus will be very much on the local matters. I think that is give a very big advantage for Sarawak government to really study what happened in Kimanis.
Okay.
All right. Extending from that, Hamidin, from this result, are you reading the defeat as a voter's anger towards Pakatan or a genuine support for BN? Because as you can see, this is BN's fifth victory in a by-election, which puts them on square 5 and 5 for BN and 5 for Pakatan.
Yep.
Is the tide changing for BN?
I don't think so. Actually, I don't think the result kind of give to both of your assumption, Hafiz. I think I don't think it's a totally rejection of the Warisan. I think, and also it's not kind of give a good support to Barisan Nasional, because what we notice, for example, in Sabah, as I mentioned just now, the role of warlord, the role of big men is very crucial. For example, in Sabah, the role of Aman family in the east is very powerful. In fact, some of the data that we get now revealing that there is a contestation between the East and the West Sabah when it comes to Kimanis, for example. That's one thing. So, in my point of view, it's not so much that it's kind of a revivalism of UMNO or Barisan Nasional with a win in Kimanis. I don't think so also. I think everybody knows that in Sabah, leaders come and go and they can switch party at any time as they wanted. And above all, the followers follow them. I think this is something that unique in Sabah situation. So, in my point of view, the current situation is very much localized. The issues is very much localized to Sabah. Not so much the rejection of the PH government. It's very much contestation between the big men and also the main issues of PSS. I think that's two, for me, that's very much colored the result in Kimanis.
Well, there was another thing that I was quite curious about, Hamidin. Voter turnout was the highest of the 10 by-elections we've had since Pakatan Harapan won GE14. I think it was about 80% voter turnout.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what your read on this is. Why was voter turnout so high?
I think if you look at the last general elections, Melisa, for example, that Kimanis have 86% turnout. So normally in Sabah politics, machinery work very, very well. Where the machinery of the party that involved, they managed to bring the voters to the postal areas. I think this is something that really much characterize Sabah politics, especially in the East Coast, in the East Malaysian politics. So where they really work and bring in the voters because of the geographical conditions, and then also because of the social structure, where the head of the families, the head of the always play a big role, active role in encouraging and bring the voters to the voting areas. So I think when it comes to vote, yes, it's high compared to others, but if we look at the Sabah politics for us, we are not surprised. We do estimate, for example, for Ilham, we do estimate around 78 to 82% turnout for Kimanis.
All right. Well, Hamidin, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and be back with more on Consider This. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Consider This. Here's what we want you to consider tonight. Does the World Economic Forum, which is hosting its 50th anniversary gathering at the exclusive mountaintop chalets of Davos in Switzerland, still have relevance today? So many critics of the gathering say elites are out of touch. However, the founder of WEF, Klaus Schwab, says is still making the case that this annual event in Switzerland is making a difference. The question is, does it? Hafiz, what do you think?
I think WEF presents the best minds gathering together in this place, in this city, small town of Davos, and just spewing out ideas and solutions of the world. So, of course, you can say that it does make a difference, but it is more about ideas and talking about solution and policy change. But does it make a difference at the world stage? It remains to be seen.
So I can understand where the criticism is coming from, right? So I mean, the attendees are often of like the top 5% of the world's economy, and then yet they're there talking about inequality of the rest of the 95% of the world. You also have them flying in with private jets and then talking on panels about climate change and a low carbon life. However, it's really that therein I see the criticisms. However, elites have always existed everywhere. Throughout all of time, there have always been elites. It's a question of what you do with that power. And I think that Davos, after all this time, or WEF, after all this time, has gotten to this point where it's become so important that you cannot miss attending if you get an invitation, or miss covering if you are a journalist, right?
And that is why our editor-in-chief, Kamarul Bahrain, is there. Because, and he's not flying in with a private jet, etc., etc., and he's not staying at a fancy hotel. He's there because he believes that AWANI believes that there is a need to cover the WEF because it presents the most important issues that is currently plaguing the world today.
Yeah, I'm also heartened to hear that there are a lot of activists there, people who actually want to make a difference. And then, if you get an audience with some of the most powerful people in the room, that would do wonders in your ability to affect change. However, I'm very disappointed to note that there are only 22% women attending Davos this year. In fact, I believe there are more North Americans at Davos 2020 than there are women.
That is a sad number.
Lack of diversity. Let's hope that changes in the future. All right, that's all the time we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. With me, Hafiz Marzuki. Signing off for tonight. We'll be back with you for another episode of Consider This tomorrow at 10 p.m. Thank you for watching and good night.